Laura, come to you first. Can the ground lost by those children be made up, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not an educational psychologist. I'm not the expert on this, but I thought you made a really good point about resilience. I'm fed up of being told that children are resilient. That Ofsted report was heartbreaking. Actually, it was enraging, and I've got almost no words for how I feel about it. This whole experience of trying to speak up for the impact on children from the beginning of lockdown has been like watching a slow lorry crash happen. And it's still happening. I'd say the lorries haven't even collided. We're just at the beginning of watching the ricochet and the impact and the full horror. Really terrible things about young children, that they're behind on crawling, understanding facial expressions, behind on language development. You mentioned they're talking in cartoon voices because of time on screens. Now, I've heard some talk about how this is parents' fault, that, they weren't parenting effectively. I'm a single parent, and let me tell you that parenting your children effectively when they're supposed to be learning on a screen and you're also working and managing in this crazy, chaotic and stressful time is too much. It's too much. No parent's responsible for the consequences upon their children. I mean, even last summer, there were reports that children in the US were speaking in British accents because they were watching so much Peppa Pig. So we've seen the problems happening piece by piece, and it's only now that people can acknowledge the full impact. I think that one group that hasn't been talked about enough is teenagers. So the Ofsted report also talked about the fact that teenagers are taking less ambitious GCSEs. So there are fewer kids doing triple science, English baccalaureate, history, and the more challenging academic subjects. So I know from talking to teachers, they've said that most children, most GCSE pupils are behind. And not only that, I've got teenage boys, and I can tell you that when they went back to school following the first lockdown, the schools were feral. This isn't the children's fault, it's not the school's fault. They were in this completely unnatural experiment. And when they went back to school, it's like they didn't know how to be. There were fights everywhere. The kids came back telling me about all the fights in school. They've been through the most peculiar and terrible time, and they shouldn't actually have to be resilient. They should never have been sacrificed. We know that they were less affected by the virus. They weren't super spreaders. Schools were not dangerous places to be. The bar to shut schools should have been so high. They shouldn't have been shut for a coronavirus. So I'm outraged. I'm really upset. And seeing the impact on my own children has been terrible. And it goes beyond just education as well. I was reading about some of the fixed penalty notices that have been applied. And this is particularly relevant now as we see that people in Downing Street are getting their £50 fines or whatever. And there was a teenager who was caught in a car with a few other lads his own age eating a takeaway Nando's. And they were from separate households, and so they were fined. And, they may face criminal records for this too. And what he wrote in mitigation was that he was deeply ashamed and that he'd gone for a Nando's to deal with the extreme stress of his long shifts at Co-op.
And he was ashamed.
As a country, we completely lost our moral grip because we imposed fines like that, the worst fines our country's seen since the Dark Ages, on teenagers going for a Nando's. And they were the worst fines since the Dark Ages because I went back historically to check.